Welcome to the monumental Mac Gamecast episode 20. Getting up there in the numbers. Really fun. I'm Junkar as always, and I've got a bunch of great friends here today, starting with Casper. How are you?
Hey, happy 20th.
Hooray, thank you. And Mr. Ted, how are you?
Doing well.
And the ever awesome Sam, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Fantastic. So Lily may or may not show up later. She's on duty. We'll see. Not going to even ping her. Don't want to bug her. So episode 20, we've got a couple things planned. We might do a bit of a part 2 on, I don't even know what to call it. Like harassment in game companies, I guess. Game company, development culture, whatever you might want to call it. Ted, Lily, and I covered a bit of that last episode, only for like 10 or so minutes, maybe 15. I'd like to hear some of maybe Sam and Casper's thoughts on that. Casper has some really cool adventures he's been doing in wine lately, and also some Silicon facts I didn't know about dual booting. I feel like a noob, so that could be interesting. He found some secret info about that, and what else was on the docket? I want to mention a little something about Gloomhaven, which finally got its official release, and we'll go from there. We'll see. There's a few other ideas floating around. We may or may not do metaverse stuff or game dev crunch or whatever. What should we start with? Sam and Casper, I'll just ask you here. Like we've talked about this briefly on other shows, touched on it, like the game controversy stuff, like with Blizzard specifically. But Blizzard's only the high profile one now. I think back a couple of years ago, Riot, who does League of Legends, they were in a lot of hot water for the same thing. Like all this reports of harassment, and I don't know if it goes as far as to say as abuse, but a lot of harassment and poor treatment of mostly women, but also some other people. And they had a bunch of people fired and all kinds of investigations. I don't believe they ever had any lawsuits against them. Maybe they did. I'd have to go back and check. Blizzard's I think, even in more hot water, but just kind of curious on your take about that. Lily's take was accountability culture should be a thing. If you mess up, you should be held accountable. That's just kind of normal. Oops, I forgot to turn on my do not disturb. There we go. Anyway, if you just had any thoughts or comments you wanted to share, starting with Casper, feel free.
Sure. I mean, I don't know so much about the specifics of late incidents, anything regarding the more recent Blizzard stuff or even the Riot things you mentioned. I know that things like this have been a problem in the industry for quite some time, and I think it's one of those cyclical things that it seems we just keep, having more stories pop up all the time. Rockstar, BioWare, it's been happening for ages, really, right? And it's a shame, it's one of those things where I feel like game development is one of those jobs where most people go into it as really a passion thing, right? You're passionate about making games, and it seems like that unfortunately gets exploited in a lot of cases. I remember in my first semester, I studied computer science, and one of my professors in the first semester, he said in a lecture that you're gonna get a nice job as a computer science professional, and you're gonna get paid well, unless you go into video game development, in which case disregard both those sentiments. You're not gonna get a nice job, and you're not gonna get paid well. You might get a job where you're really passionate about the things you're producing, but you're gonna be producing them under probably terrible conditions. And he laid that out for us.
Whoops. Bit of lag. Uh-oh. Casper's been frozen. Ted and Sam, you guys still here? Oh.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, all right. Wasn't sure if it was me. Sorry, Casper, you cut out for a little bit.
What was the last thing?
You were last saying your professor laid it out for you.
Right. Well, in essence, I was just saying that I think it's really a shame that your passion can be exploited in that way.
That is a shame. Sam, you have any thoughts or comments on this stuff?
Yeah, I've been I wouldn't say I've been following it, but it's come up on a lot of the other podcasts I listen to. Sort of, Riot was a while ago. They had a few people came out and said some weird stuff was going on, and then like kind of stopped. And like a year later, I think there was a full like open letter, which was like very eye opening, very like embarrassing at the least for the executives. Just like weird like stuff going on. Riot didn't have so much of like an illegal thing going on. It had more of just like a, you guys need to act like adults. Like it looks like this company's being run by like 12-year-olds. That's kind of what it looked like. But then Activision, they had the whole lawsuit from the state of California, and like they're having like employee walkouts, and people are calling for what's his name, Bobby Kotick or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget he's been fired yet or not, but a lot of hundreds of staff are calling for his resignation, like internal staff. So yeah, it's and then Ubisoft had their seemed more isolated to a few individuals, not like more of a, it wasn't really a company thing. It was more like this one VP had like 10 allegations, so they got canned. Definitely, it's been a theme over the last few years. And like what Casper was saying, I think whenever you go into a job industry that is related to passions, people will exploit that, and you see it even outside of the gaming industry. Like I was talking to I'll just say colleague, someone I know, a colleague. They work for their family-owned business, and they're not exploited in like an illegal way, but it's just like he mentioned what he makes, and I know how much that industry pays, and he's making like under half of what he should be making.
Wow.
And then the excuse is, it's like, well, it's family. Like what do you mean? Like why would you bring up pay? Like this is your family. Like it's like, well, he has a family too that he needs to pay for. So,
Exactly.
Yeah, you see it outside of gaming, and like certain gaming jobs I think are really, really good. Like not Cyberpunk. Wow, I'm blanking on the name. CD Projekt. Sorry. They have had a lot of flack for crunch over the years, but there's also been a lot of articles come out where like those guys are in the top 1% of Polish people in terms of income. So it kind of depends where you are. I think software engineers obviously make a killing in a lot of parts of the world compared to game development, but in other parts, like Poland, for example, CD Projekt's one of the most viable companies in the country. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess I didn't really answer the question. But
No, it's related. Also, Lily hopped on. We're talking about continuing our conversation about, I don't even know what to call it in a few words, basically harassment or what's the word, exploitation in game development, workplaces, similar things. Casper had some thoughts, Sam was talking. But that's all related, because it's not just the harassment thing. It's like, well, there's like this overall umbrella of exploitation, and under that one section could be harassment, one section could be like underpaid or overworked. There's a bunch of different areas under this like overall umbrella of mistreatment. I mean, the world's full of it. That doesn't make it okay. It's just seems to be an unfortunate reality, especially in these larger workplaces, especially when they get corporate and they get big, and then things start to fall through the cracks, and maybe they don't get reported, or if they do, someone doesn't care, or someone's too influential or powerful or rich or whatever it might be. The accountability Lily had referred to last time, meaning last podcast, is starting to be pushed for more and more, and we are seeing it. Like Sam was saying, some of these people have been canned and fired at Ubisoft and other places. The whole Riot debacle. Blizzard's just really high profile, or Activision Blizzard. Casper, what are you thinking?
Well, if you just finish your little thing, because it was something semi-related, but not entirely so.
Okay, I was just sort of mentioning, like, well, the game crunch thing is interesting to me. I guess depending, because a lot of anyone who works in software development, web development, any of these sort of digital development type spaces, or, well, I guess hardware is not digital, but software, some sort of crunch is pretty common. I've worked not on every project, but on some web projects, I've had 2 or 3 day marathons where I'm just working all day, all night, and just grabbing coffee or whatever. Like I'm a zombie, but you push and get it done. So I guess the real question is, the crunch isn't bad. Sometimes it's necessary. The problem is, I guess, the duration of the crunch, right? Is it a few days? Is it a few weeks? Is it a few months? Well, then it just gets ridiculous. No one should be crunching for like months on end.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of what I was going to go into as well, because I think, especially when you consider the crunch aspect of it all, I'd argue that the grand failure of leadership in this aspect is how things are announced way too early and how projects aren't managed in terms of their evolving scope and the time allotted to finish projects. Because if you in games especially, you have release dates that are sometimes like, oh, this will come out in 2022, 2023 or something like that. Things are announced way ahead of time, and then almost inevitably things get delayed, right? I mean, when was the last time a game got released that didn't get a delay as well, right? I don't know, but it happens very rarely. Yeah. Everything gets delayed.
Yeah.
And in terms of when you manage a software project, what you typically say is that you can have a fixed release date, you can have a fixed number of features, or a fixed level of quality, but you can't have all three at once. You gotta pick two, maybe, right? You can't have everything. Right. And if they fix a release date, and they also want quality, and they also promise all these features, then something's got to give, right? You can't have everything. And that's where we enter these problems with extended periods of crunch, with emotional manipulation to trying to get people to put more hours in, maybe even without extra pay for it, and all these issues, right? But if you relax the time constraint and you say, we're just going to build a quality product, and we're not going to necessarily announce a release date way too early that we then have to stick to in the public eye, but maybe do something akin to what Apple does when they release hardware, where you say, hey, we're announcing it, get it next week or something. That might not be the best approach marketing-wise either, I don't know, but all I'm saying is that if you announce things way too early and you also announce a bunch of features and things, well, it's bound to happen this way.
Interesting.
Yeah, they have this weird dance between like employee, what would the right word be? Just like how nice or like quality of a workplace it is to work for. But then the other side of that is like the publisher and like the execs that are like, Q4, we need to hit X dollars and blah, blah, blah. So you see tons of games will either get delayed massively, or they get the opposite treatment where they aren't ready at all. And they're like, you know what, we're going to like release this thing. They definitely know it's not in shape to release, and then it releases, and then everybody starts shitting all over the devs because this game is garbage. And it's like, well, that's kind of not really like, sometimes the devs mess up, like Cyberpunk, they are their own publisher, so you can't really blame that. But other games, our good one is No Man's Sky, like it's a tiny indie team. Marketing for that game was off the charts, and then Sony partnered with them for PlayStation. They were like a timed exclusive, I believe, and they were like all over the Sony marketing. The game comes out, it's garbage. Well, it's good now, but I mean, at release, it was really bad. And then Sony's marketing head starts like taking shots at the studio as if Sony didn't know that this game wasn't anywhere in line with the expectations. I don't know. It's just, this is big like blame game, like finger pointing. Yeah, they definitely need to optimize some things in that industry.
Yeah.
It's a weird industry compared to a lot of other ones.
I mean, I personally like what Casper was saying about release dates. I mean, I guess it depends on how big you are. Your brand, Apple, has obviously got a huge following. They know people are going to buy their stuff kind of whenever they announce it or release it. Like, it's really reliable. But I feel like there's a lot of big companies or developers who have like made names for themselves already, and they've put out quality games before. I feel like they could do a similar thing, you know, or maybe not a week. Let's just say instead of a week, it could be a month, or let's say 1 to 3 month window. That's fairly reasonable. Instead of this like 1 to 2 year window or 18-month window, then it gets delayed another 3 to 6 months or even more, and all this stuff. And all the like you said, you can't have all three. So then like features are dropped and things are rushed, or it's odd. I wonder if it's because they need the hype for like investors or shareholders, but not every game company necessarily has to worry about all that stuff. So I don't really know. Maybe they're just caught up in their own hype, or is it people just overestimating their own abilities to deliver on the project in a certain time frame, or I mean, I think in most software or web development, something like 60% of projects go over time budget. It's just like so common. So it's clearly a problem in the industry in general. Why people don't adjust more, I don't know. I really can't say because I've only been in a small company before. Yeah, Ted, what are you thinking?
Well, one of the things that kind of irks me, and I've seen this a lot reading forums and stuff like that. People, users, players, complaining bitterly about a missed release date, and I think some of it is generated by the people like us who play the games and say, can't you guys get your act together? And if you say it's going to be released on this date, it darn well better be. And that's kind of crazy because, in my opinion, I'd rather buy the game when it's ready to play than get the game and then say, oh gosh, it crashed. And then I have a good friend of mine that tried a game that came out too early. It just wouldn't even boot onto his computer. He finally to get a refund on it, and he'll probably never play it now because of that, because it wasn't ready when he got it. And and I'm sure that's just not the only example. And I think a lot of times people get turned off. I mean, if you really, really, really like the concept of it, you might stick with it, but a lot of people get turned off. And I think to some degree the marketing people are looking at what the market's asking for, and they're trying to, get everybody aroused. Oh, we got to buy this thing. We got to buy this thing. And if the frenzy goes away, they're going to lose sales. And it's kind of a, combination of the people and the marketing. And that's kind of where I was thinking, but one of those little things that irks me.
No, that makes sense. I mean, you can't say marketing's just a gimmick. I mean, Cyberpunk, okay, it's unique because it was so hyped, but by the numbers, apparently they had 10 million pre-orders. Not even like post-release sales, which were even more. Like, that's how hyped the game was. But they announced the game in like 2013 or something, or 2014. It was like 8 years later. They put out a cinematic, I remember. It was pretty cool. And it was like, but then you forget about the game because it's not even, coming out for forever. So some amount of hype is required to be sure. It just seems like a lot of it's overshot. I mean, it's interesting to talk about CD Projekt or CD. I don't understand really. They have like CD Projekt and CD Projekt Red. I'm not sure if those are like two separate labels for some reason. Anyway, they also got in some hot water for The Witcher 3. For demoing it, I think, at an E3 or one of those big game events back in the game was released in 2015, so this must have been 2013 or 14. And the game they showed, which was supposed to be like in-game footage, demo footage, still in production, but still, was actually way better looking than what was released a year or two later. So then people were like, well, wait a minute, you showed us this much better looking game, just visually. They didn't have like cut features or anything. It was just a graphical fidelity thing. It was like, it looked way better when you showed us what happened. They're like, well, it turned out it wasn't feasible across hardware, blah, 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 blah. But they didn't own up to that. They just released it. And then when people complained, they had to like address it. So I don't know, devs just do weird things. It's, will they stop that? No, but there is more backlash for it now. Like, again, accountability. It's more than just like mistreating your employees or other employees and like harassment stuff. There's also other accountability for like, are you being honest about the product you're making? So that seems to be becoming more of a focus lately. But the problem is, these games that are committing these kinds of offenses tend to be so big and so hyped, tons of people buy them anyway. So they're already making, in most cases, they've made their money. They're not like being punished by people like, well, I'm going to vote with my wallet. It's like, well, you already did. I feel like that's sort of like a catch-22. So it's like companies just keep doing it because they largely get away with it, at least if they're big enough or if they're hyped enough.
Yeah, and kind of on that topic, I think they get away with it a lot, whether it be like exploiting staff or like impropriety or like literally illegal stuff, because the gaming industry on like the AAA end of things, not the indie end, on the AAA end, it's such a small industry in terms of like how many companies there is. Like you have a couple big publishers, a couple big studios at each, and everybody kind of knows each other. If you like frustrate your bosses at Activision Blizzard, this is a couple years ago before all the stuff came out, they'll probably just bad talk you to the guys they know at EA, and now you can't get a job at EA. And then, okay, that's like 90% North American development now that you're not blacklisted from. Maybe you go to like Canada or Europe with Ubisoft, but that's a big move. Like it's such a tiny industry. So like there's not enough room to like, boycott. I don't mean that in like, there's literally not, but like, it's just such a confined industry. Like you think of like TV or movies, like something happens with a director or whatever, it's pretty easy to like say like I'm gonna boycott this thing, and it's obviously easy to boycott a game. It's a piece of entertainment. It's not like we have to play it. But on the other hand, let's say you like, I don't know, open world RPGs. This might be the only open world RPG that releases for 3 years. So if you boycott that, that's the only game that you had for the next 3 years, and then hopefully someone else release one in 3 years. But it's not like other mediums where there's just a copious amount of content available on
really
the high
interesting
end, AAA
point.
end of things.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think I had asked this of Lily and Ted a bit on the last podcast. Like, what are for Sam and Casper? Question at you. Like, what's your personal philosophy on this? Talking about the boycotting thing. Like, would you be upset enough with a company, whatever company, pick your company or game, like to not buy it or to stop playing it, or like how do you feel about that? This isn't a judgment thing. I'm just curious. Like, how do you approach it? Because I know some, because I had a bunch of people who play Blizzard games, because I played a lot of them the last 5 or whatever, my whole life, I guess. And I know a number of them over this had actually stopped. Some of them had uninstalled their Blizzard games. Some of them had kept playing them, but refused to spend any more money on them, kind of a thing. I don't know. What's your like personal thoughts on that sort of idea?
I guess I'll go first. So I used to be very very like rigid about like I remember way back in the day I boycotted EA because they left Steam. I didn't like that, so I wanted everything to be on Steam.
Yeah.
But then obviously over the years there's been other stuff going on, whether it's just like a horribly misrepresented game where it's like they advertise it this, it's actually not anything like that. I'll never fault anybody who boycotts. I think it's admirable and it's noble, but I kind of have decided my time and like enjoyment is more important than like the pennies that the company is going to lose from me not buying the game.
Yeah.
I mean, comparatively. So I know it's like kind of hypocritical, but it's like me not buying, I don't know, I don't have a good game example, but it's like $60 or whatever. It's like the studio doesn't care if I don't buy the game. Mm-hmm. So the only person I'm really hurting, if I actually wanted to play it, was myself. Yeah. I know that's, I don't know, I don't love my logic there, but I kind of I don't have a ton of time, so like
I feel that. I feel that too.
I don't know.
If you really like, it also matters like what you're saying. Like, what are your options in that space? Is there like 5 different games you could play that are similar, or is there really only one for a really long time? And if I'm really attached to playing something, I'm probably going to still buy it anyway. Again, that's potentially hypocritical.
It would depend like why I was boycotting it. If it's just like, oh, I'm upset that they have microtransactions, and like, well, who cares? But if it's like, obviously there's more depraved things, and then that would be a hard boycott. But Activision, for example, I don't really play any of their games, so it hasn't even been a discussion I've had in my head about it.
Right. It's interesting also, like, again, why you're boycotting. When EA left Steam, I also didn't like that. Although I had an Origin account, which I sort of gave to Lily. It's just hers now with a couple games on it. Although we shared it for a bit.
It's not yours anymore.
No, it's not. It's under her email and everything. It all got fully switched over. But the other flips, I know Casper hasn't answered yet, but not the flip side. Another element to this I just remembered, and I did bring it up at the end of the last podcast, is like in this terms of boycotting, not supporting. Because in most cases, let's say it's for something serious like workplace conditions. Ideally, it never happens, but unfortunately, there's always going to be a scumbag somewhere. That just seems to be a fact of life. So ideally, it's something more like Ubisoft, where it's just like, oh, one guy's the problem, you get rid of him. And the general like workplace culture, executive culture, whatever is pretty solid. Then you have other cases where it's just like widespread, and that's more of an issue. So if you're trying to boycott something, of course, really the goal is to try and hold those people, the leadership accountable, or whoever's in charge of handling this kind of stuff, whether it's a bad HR department or whatever it is, some bum like Bobby Kotick. So you're trying to hold them accountable by, say, boycotting the game and not buying it or not spending more money on it. Maybe it's a subscription game or a game with microtransactions or whatever. But at the same time, you don't want to hurt the regular employees. You want to support them. So I guess I don't have any data on this. I'm not sure. But like, say there was a mass boycott of a game, like big time. In most cases, they've already made their money, like I was saying, and the boycotts come later. So it's kind of questionable how useful that is. But let's just say it was very effective. I don't know, 1 million people refused to buy a game or something. I guess what I'm not sure is the average employee hurt by this more than like the executives? Do the executives not care because they have enough money or other ways to make money or something? You know what I mean? I don't have the exact words for it, but like, I feel like that's a potential sort of double-edged sword where the people who really get punished may not be the ones in charge, but could be regular employees like, who let go, I don't know, because Blizzard was criticized also. They let go like 800 to 1,000 employees or something in, I think, 2019, 2020. But then they like paid all their execs a bunch of extra money. And people are like, well, why couldn't you have just kept the employees and paid them? So, but they're like, oh, profits are down, rah, 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 we have to let people go. So it's like, it seems like that might punish the wrong people. But then, of course, the idea of the boycott is to trying to do a good thing. That accountability, referencing Lily, accountability, like culture, is key. So, like, how do you do that? Or is it just like, is there unavoidable collateral damage, casualties of war, quote unquote, in this, with like employees getting fired? I don't know. I don't have an answer. I'm just thinking out loud. Anyway, Casper, you can chime in if you want.
Yeah. So, one continuation of what you just said is, I heard something at one point. I think it was from People Make Games, but I'm not entirely sure. But they were discussing the idea of a boycott as well. And they were talking to some developers from some big studio. And it was actually kind of 50-50 split between the employees there, what they thought of it. Some of them thought that a boycott was sympathetic to poor working conditions, while other employees thought that, we've worked so hard and crunched on this. Go play it, for Christ's sake. I mean, we literally spent blood, sweat, and tears on this. Go play it so that our work wasn't for nothing, right?
That's a good angle, yeah.
So, I don't know. I think that's just a fun little take on it as well. That even within the employee circles, not everyone feels the same necessarily.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, you bust your bum putting out this game, whatever it is. Let's just say it's a AAA one. They usually take years and years to make. You're going to want to see good sales. You're going to want to see a lot of players. You're going to want to see good reviews on whatever platform, typically Steam, but there are others. That makes sense. Even if it was a painful process for you, well, like that's kind of rewarding you. Oh, okay. Like, yeah, the gaming populace, whatever, likes the work we put in. I can see that too, being kind of validating. I guess would be... Sorry, I'm talking too much. Go ahead.
In terms of the problem more as a whole, I think that the idea of a boycott is kind of a band-aid to a lost arm or something like that. Sure, it might be something that can send a message that this isn't okay, but I'm not convinced that it's going to have a lasting or meaningful impact necessarily. And the change has got to come from bigger factors than that, be it legal in terms of the really severe cases or, more just company culture or gaming culture. I don't know. But I'm not sure that the boycott necessarily sends that message clear enough or that it even necessarily sends the message at all, right? You might have a bunch of people boycott a game, but are we sure that the reason why the boycott is happening is even being interpreted the right way? I mean, maybe not.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I like that a lot. It would seem to me, I just thought of this, maybe the more effective boycotts are from the employees themselves, like we're seeing with Blizzard. They're doing walkouts and protests and stuff like that. You know, a state, in this case California, actually has a legal lawsuit against the company for like actual harassment. Like, it would seem maybe that is the more effective way, because it doesn't get misinterpreted. You know, because it's the actual people working there. Or maybe, you know, friends of people working there or something, whatever it is, who have more of like a knowledge of what's happening or how they feel, because we don't know how they feel about it. Like you were saying, it could be interpreted the wrong way. They might just rather people play their game anyway. It's probably a real double whammy if you put a lot of pain in, or maybe you were mistreated, and then your game comes out and people are like, terrible game, or boycott, or what do you call it, review bombs, and all this like whatever stuff, and then you're like, then you really feel like it was for nothing because no one's playing. Of course, in some cases, people just put out bad games. That does happen. And, well, sorry, your game isn't very good. But perhaps that's the better approach. I don't know if it's like, can employees get better contracts, or like, can there be some more legal accountability for this stuff, or oversight, or whatever in big companies? Like, that's probably the lasting change that would be more useful than kind of this Band-Aid idea you were mentioning. Yeah.
Yeah. And sort of from a personal perspective on the idea of boycotts, well, it's been so long since I've bought anything that wasn't just a sale or something, like €5 sale or something. So I don't know. I don't think it's mattered that much in my personal game buying anyway.
Right. Yeah, I feel that. I was just thinking about that the other day. Like, when's the last time I bought a game for more than like $20? I don't know. It's been a really long time. Because I'm buying it a year or two after its release in a lot of cases. I guess I spent like $22 or $3 on Gloomhaven. I think it's $25. For some reason I had, I don't know, $1 or $2 in my Steam wallet, so it was like a little discounted. They did just get its Mac release 3 days ago officially, which is cool. I brought it up on the podcast more than once, reviewed it and whatever. But yeah, now it's officially out there on Steam, Mac release. It's not crashing all the time and all that stuff. So that's cool. Yeah. Lily, did you have any thoughts you wanted to add on this whole, whatever you want to call it, exploitation, I guess, and stuff? Whether
yeah,
that umbrella,
I mean, there's kind of a lot. There was one point I thought of earlier when you talked about like pushing through like the grind and all that. I think it comes down to also the work environment at the end of the day, because you mentioned like, okay, sometimes you have to stay late and doing work, and yeah, for a couple of days that's fine, but I think that's also it's also about whether or not your employer is holding employees on a task-based system or a time-based system. Because if it's task-based, then yeah, that makes sense, because you have some short days, you have some long days. Sometimes like with the army, for example, I've had units that run things in a task-based system. Like my current unit is task-based, so sometimes I'll be there for half a day, and sometimes I'll be there 3 hours after all the other enlisted personnel are gone. It's just, it's based on what we're doing on that day. And then there's time-based, where it's like, you're sitting here from 9 to 5 every day, regardless of what's happening. And so you have employees that maybe finish all their tasks for the day and then are just sitting there. And then later on, it's like, oh, by the way, now we have to force you to do overtime because this is behind. And it's like, okay, well, last week I was sitting here 3 hours a day doing nothing, and now you're making me spend even more of my time here when this could have been solved earlier, So it's, I feel there's an organizational problem there if it's the latter. If it's, you got employees sitting around doing nothing because you're forcing them to stay for a certain amount of time, which most places do that. But then also you can't add on, hey, we're going to force you to work overtime now, when you didn't, like, when the higher ups didn't properly plan for this earlier, and you had that time, and now you're punishing your employees for your incompetence,
Right.
And then I think on on the whole boycotting thing, I don't think there's an easy solution there. And I think it was mentioned, yeah, sometimes it comes down on the workers, but more often than not, an employee or an employer rather will not just start firing employees because of a boycott. They'll usually threaten it, but it rarely actually comes through. And when it does, it's a big deal. And I think at the end of the day, we as a consumer can only do so much to demand change from an employer. And I think that's probably the only way is by not consuming their products. And that's not for everyone. But like me personally, I have not opened up the Activision Blizzard client in God, has it been months now? I don't know. It's been a while since this whole thing started, and I was already not a fan of the direction WoW was going, and I was kind of just playing Overwatch just to play it. And then this happened, and I was like, well, they already have my money, yeah, but I don't need to give them my time. That goes into their analytics, and the subscription and the microtransactions. There's still plenty of ways that they benefit off that. So me personally, it's like I can't do much on an individual level to affect change, but something I've always sort of tried to profess is you have to do everything you can on an individual level to drive change. And in this case, if it means I'm not playing Overwatch anymore, well, I'm playing Apex Legends instead. It's not a big deal to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, the gaming industry is small, but there's always another game out there. That's just my thought on it.
Yeah, it makes sense. I was just, because you mentioned you weren't sure when you were last on, I just checked my Battle.net 3 months ago. I don't know how many more. It could be like almost 4 months, so it just shows 3. So
yeah, because it might have opened up the client automatically or something like that.
Oh yeah, I've seen that from a lot of my friends there. Yeah,
but I definitely haven't played the games in a hot minute.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you have to wonder if any other big, again, we're talking AAA space here. Is anyone else looking at like Activision Blizzard and all the hot water they're in, legally and from the gaming sector in general? Their stocks are down, and of course there's all this negative press and journalism and the lawsuits or lawsuit or suits plural. I'm not sure if it's more than one. Do other companies look at this and be like, oh, we gotta shape up, we gotta add new rules or oversight or something? I'm pretty sure one company, maybe it was Nintendo, they put out some kind of statement like they condemn it, and I think it was Nintendo, and they're gonna try and do everything they can for their employees. I don't know, I'm paraphrasing. I think Nintendo might have put out something like that. Not that Nintendo, that I know of anyway, has been in any sort of hot water for that. But it'd be nice to see more companies being proactive, I guess.
I like Lily's points. And one final thing with the boycotts, it definitely depends on the company. I was looking it up a little bit, and different companies have very different bonus structures. So Bungie, for example, when they were with Activision for Destiny 1, they had bonuses tied to Metacritic score. So if Destiny 1, people didn't like it that much, but there was no controversy other than that. But let's say there was a big controversy, people decide to review bomb it. That's literally tens of $1,000s per employee that you're taking out of the employees' pockets. And then other companies like or CD Projekt, they do profit share. So I'm not saying go buy the game so the one dev gets an extra 3 cents of profit share, but on a macro level, if it costs millions of sales, that's real money. They average $35,000 per employee on the bonus for Cyberpunk, so that's a lot of money, obviously, for a random individual. But other companies, it's just pure salary, so it's complicated. Boycotts will have very different effects on very different companies, and obviously a multiplayer game like Overwatch, not giving your time is an actual big deal, because multiplayer games live and die off of how many people are giving their time. If it's Skyrim, I don't think Bethesda cares how much time you're giving, because it's just a single player game. So yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, the multiplayer time aspect, regardless of money, because even it's a free-to-play game. Just again, most of them are multiplayer. Maybe even all of them. I don't know if there's actually any pure single-player free-to-play, like big. Again, talking bigger games here, not some like random little indie game. I think just about all of them are multiplayer, so that's an interesting point as well. Yeah. Regardless of the money, the time aspect. Yeah, so the conclusion is, there's no one conclusion. It's complicated, like Sam was just saying. But I like that. This is why I wanted to have a part 2, because I wanted to hear Sam and Casper's thoughts, Lily speak again. Bringing a lot of interesting perspectives to this for me to think about, and hopefully the listeners. I think that's all I have for this topic. Unless anyone else has additional comments, we could move on to our next subject. Feeling good. All right. Casper, you've been having some adventures in wine lately on your new computer. Just basically want you to talk about that and kind of what got you started, what kind of games you've been playing, and, just chat about it a bit.
Yeah, so I got my M1 Max, 16-inch MacBook Pro, which is exciting. And, as a result of no bootcamp, of course, I went on some adventures to see, what can I actually make run on this thing without necessarily going into the already well-explored routes of crossover and what's it called, parallels. Looking more at it's kind of the same thing as crossover, but I've been using Wine in a more quote-unquote pure sense. Crossover is a project that's built on top of Wine, in a sense. Code weavers, they say they push back or give back, push up to the main repository of Wine around 95% of the code that they make, especially for crossover, but not necessarily at the same time. And it's a whole thing. But crossover and Wine are closely connected, and code weavers even host the Wine website. But Wine is a separate thing in itself, just closely tied to crossover. But yeah, I've been using Wine to see what I could make run of Windows titles on my M1 Max, and all in all, like performance in the things that do run, top notch. It runs. I can run a game like Elix. I don't know if you know it, but Elix, it's an RPG made by Piranha Bytes, the same people who made the Gothic series and Risen and games like that. I can run that at native resolution, so just under 4K, all settings pushed to max at like 90 frames per second average. And that's just a 24-core GPU model, not even the 32-core, right? Nice. There are issues, though. Elix, for one thing, it's got some flickering issues, where some textures keep flickering in and out of existence, and that's kind of a game-breaking problem, because it's frustrating to look at, right? Mm-hmm. Some games run perfectly, though. Dark Souls runs perfectly 4K full resolution, native resolution. Locked at 60 frames per second, runs perfectly fine. Nice. I haven't gotten it to work with controller support, but that apparently does work in crossover. I haven't gotten it to work in my Wine setup. Mass Effect 2 works, but I could only get that to work with an OpenGL backend, not Molten VK, DXVK. So performance in there it's not locked at 60. It's more like hovering around 45-ish, which isn't great considering the age of the game, where Elix is much newer and looks a lot better, and it's like 90 FPS, but it works, right? I've had some various issues with other titles, like Dragon Age Origins. You can get through the character creation, but as soon as you try and start the game, it just crashes instantly. And most games, honestly, don't work with the setup I've got working so far. They just crash on boot before you properly get into them, like after the intro cinematics or something like that. Some games have audio issues and things like that, but the things that do work perform extremely well. So that's kind of where I'm at with the testing so far. Cool.
Have you done any non-Wine game testing? Again, not referring to Rosetta 2 as... Yeah, native and means, yeah.
Right, through macOS.
Just regular macOS stuff.
I played I've played a full game of Civilization 6, played a bit of Endless Space, and I think that's it, honestly. Not much more than that right now. But my observations there is that Civilization 6, it's like there's that in-game benchmark for Civilization 6. It's not reflective at all of the performance of that game. When I ran the in-game GPU benchmark, it was like 22 frames per second, and I was like, that seems really low. Then I actually played through a full game of it, and it was constantly at like 70 FPS, even when you had the full map and everything was visible and kicking off. I don't know what was going on with the in-game benchmark there.
Interesting.
It played fine. And if you set it to, so in the settings for the game, you can lock the frame rate at 60, 30, or even 20 for like saving on battery. If you lock it to 30, the fans are off. So that's kind of cool.
Oh, interesting. Right. I mean, for a game of Civ, do you really need like 60 or more FPS? Probably not.
Not really. No. But I actually, for the most part, when playing the game, other than just testing what the actual frame rate limit was, I set it to 30 FPS just because no fan noise and long battery life, right? I could play a whole night on battery and it just ran. So that was kind of nice.
So you're happy with the machine so far? Because, Sam and I talked about ours a few weeks ago. So far, so good for you?
Oh, I'm enjoying it massively. I mean, so I primarily use it as a software development platform rather than a gaming device, right? So for that, it's doing exactly what I want from it, and I'm enjoying it a lot. I've had a few things that's been like, this has taken me a bit longer than it would have on an Intel machine, but I've gotten everything to work. It's just been a matter of how much effort it's been. Specifically, I'm thinking of my Haskell compiler, which was a bit of a pain to get set up, but it works.
Nice. Yeah, I don't think mentioned it, but Casper has the 24-core machine, so you got an upgraded one.
The 24-core GPU M1 Max.
Yeah, so that's nice. Once again, we lack any like super exciting new AAA stuff to like push these machines. But I had a thought this week that it's kind of interesting that the Silicon machines, especially any of the new ones, a Pro or a Max, they can actually run any available Mac game in existence. Like they can run it and run it well. And that's kind of interesting. That wasn't true of the Intel machines, unless you necessarily bought a higher end one. Even the first Silicon, first gen, the M1s, with the exception of like the 7-core MacBook Air, like if you buy an 8-core one, especially if you get like the 16 GB RAM upgrade, you can also pretty much, again, run like every game in existence on means that currently runs. Obviously, there's a bunch of stuff that won't run because of the whole 32, 64-bit thing. All 64-bit games. Stuff, again, that will either isn't very well optimized or is high-end. You're not going to run it at like high settings on an M1, even an 8-core machine. But it'll be playable. Like Borderlands 3 is playable, like just barely at super low settings and stuff. But it's playable.
Actually, there is one sort of exception to that. One other game that I did test was actually XCOM 2, just to see how it ran. And I don't know what's going on with that, but it was basically locked at 18 frames per second. Like terrible.
Interesting.
And resource utilization was at like 12% for both CPU and GPU. It didn't use any of the hardware. It just stayed at 18 frames per second. Sometimes went up to 20, so it wasn't like a hard lock. Don't know what was going on there.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a caveat because we are also working with Rosetta or new hardware and older games. Not really sure of those interactions. I was making a blanket statement, probably unwise, as you were just saying. Even on Intel, XCOM 2 is notoriously like performance hungry. But it should be using, like, why isn't it using your resources? I don't know. That's weird. Yeah. Feral's usually good about that stuff. I don't know if they'll, in some cases, because these like Feral and Aspire and such, they're big in the Mac space, but by any like game company comparison, they're small. So they don't have the resources to necessarily go back and update every game. That's why Aspire dropped a ton of games. Feral dropped a ton of games. They're like, we're just not going to port these to, you're not going to upgrade them to 64-bit, for example, or maybe not upgrade them to, I guess, So I don't think, with the exception of Feral, maybe a couple games, everything's still running through Rosetta 2. So, but in most cases, maybe almost all, with a few exceptions, I think it's pretty cool that you can buy a Silicon machine. It can almost run everything. It's not like a console where it's like everything's going to run more or less at these settings and these FPS and the screen resolution. So it's not like that locked. There's still going to be variables there, quite a lot, but nothing should be, almost nothing. Again, a few exceptions. Everything should be playable. And I think that's really cool. And again, good, because Mac gamers in particular, the casual ones, seem to really struggle with system requirements. It's the most common question I see everywhere on forums. I get them on my YouTube, even on videos that are like years old sometimes. I get a comment, oh, will this run on this? It's almost always a laptop. Will it run on this machine from 2012 or 15? Or sometimes it's a new one. I got a new one, and they just don't know. And they're asking about, I don't know, XCOM or Hades or, I don't know, I have a bunch of games up there. I see it all over Apple Discords that I'm in. It's the most common question just every day. Will this run? Will this run? What will run on my machine? People don't know. And you still see that on the M1 stuff too. But now you have to worry about it less. Because again, unless you buy the absolute minimum M1 7-core, more or less everything will run reasonably well. Or at least acceptably well. And of course, if you have a Pro or a Max, a lot of stuff will run very well. So I think that's really cool as a thought. Like, pretty neat. That's true right now. May not be true next year. May not be true when, like, Total War Warhammer 3 releases. It's probably going to be very demanding. Will run on the new machines. Probably not that great on, like, an M1. But that Pro or a Max should be no problem. So it's true right now, but that's still pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I wanted to talk about something that I was completely unaware of / ignorant of, and Casper corrected me. I was under the impression for some reason that the Silicon machines were, like, literally incapable of dual booting. Like, it wasn't even possible. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. But apparently it is possible.
Yep.
In Casper, you had found also something in relation to dual booting and, like, Windows and a just revealed, what do you call it? Agreement between Microsoft and someone else about Windows, and that's why it's not available
Qualcomm.
for like this. Yeah, you could
Yeah,
talk about that for a little
Microsoft has supposedly has, or allegedly has, or whatever a proper word there would be, a deal with Qualcomm that limits the Windows and ARM license to Qualcomm devices, or probably also Microsoft devices. The Microsoft Surface, did that have a Qualcomm processor in it? Does anyone know that? Probably did, didn't it?
Not sure.
The one from like a year ago did.
Yeah,
Surface
right.
Pro X.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. So yeah, they had a deal that prohibited Windows and ARM from officially being licensed for devices not with Qualcomm chips in them. So Microsoft, as people might know, if you want to run Windows on ARM through Parallels or something like that, you have to sign up through the Insider program and download it that way. Because you can't download a Windows on ARM ISO through normal means, because Windows doesn't, or Microsoft doesn't officially allow you to buy a license for it. And that's apparently because of this deal with Qualcomm, which is supposedly expiring fairly soon. And back when the M1 chips were originally announced and the M1 Air and 13-inch Pro came out, Apple, I think it was Craig Federighi in an interview with someone, MKBHD maybe, Jonathan Morrison from YouTube, one of those two, I think. Craig Federighi said that Apple had what they needed to make Windows work on these machines, and the ball was in Microsoft's court to make that happen. And they were ready to talk to them about potentially making a boot camp option or similar. So with this deal expiring, it's possible, not necessarily happening, but it's possible that a boot camp solution could come to the Apple Silicon Mac.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Again, it's the possibility. I guess, I mean, they did it for all the Intel machines for so long. I guess, let's assume the deal expires soonish. Maybe we'll see it even sometime next year. I guess the question is, Apple would have to make new support for it, because currently, if someone listening hasn't boot camped before, you have to partition your hard drive first. There's a whole boot camp assistant you can use, which is very easy, and it makes you plug in some external drive of some kind to download. I think it's about 800 megabytes or something, maybe a gigabyte of boot camp drivers and support, blah 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 stuff, which you then plug in at some point during the installation, or maybe after the installation of Windows is done. Obviously, that's all for Intel stuff, so they have to come up with something new for the Silicon. But it is a fact that Windows can run on ARM machines, so that isn't an issue. So that would be very interesting if Boot Camp would return. Again, I would prefer Mac gaming, be more of a focus, but if people aren't going to release Mac games or not in as much quantity, people are going to game how they're going to game, whether that's through Wine or Crossover or a streaming thing like GeForce Now or Boot Camp. Of course, Boot Camp currently not possible on a Silicon machine, but the other options are, or again, Parallels. So people are doing a lot of interesting things. Andy Tizer, Andrew Tsai, TSAI, I don't know how to say his name. He does a ton of testing on all this with the new machines on YouTube. We've referenced him before. He was on an episode, I think 5 for an interview. But he's just cranking videos of this stuff. So if you're curious about like, what will a Pro or Max machine run in like Wine and Parallels and whatever, it's like 50 or 100 games or something tested across multiple videos. He's a machine. I mean that in a good way, trying to compliment him. Like, he's doing good work in this particular space. So, yeah. So if you're curious about that or don't want to tinker yourself, maybe like someone like Casper who will just tinker around with Wine, you can go have a peek in those videos. There's a few other people who put out some of this content too, but he's the main guy in bulk as far as I can see. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty nice. Let me see. Those are the main things I wanted to cover. Oh, Lily's here. I forgot. Okay. I don't know if the rest of you guys are interested in this, but I am, so I'm going to be selfish here. Lily, do you want to talk about Arcane a little bit?
I fucking love Arcane.
Yeah. Okay. Have you watched any more episodes?
I got home from my in-laws yesterday, and I binge watched all of the other episodes in one sitting.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. I watched 5 or 6 in one go. When I started watching it like a week ago, I was like, I'll check this out. And then like 4 or 5 hours later, it's like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Quick intro. Arcane is a new Netflix series. I think it was a French studio who made like the animation. I don't know the name, but anyway, it's League of Legends based TV show. League of Legends being developed by Riot, which is a MOBA, 5v5 head-to-head game like Dota 2 or Heroes of the Storm and stuff like that. Is available on Mac, has been for a very long time. The game came out itself, I think, in 2009, or at least the beta was in 2009. Really old game, been around for, super popular. So what's interesting here is Lily is a League fan, has been for a while. I am not a League fan at all. League being short for League of Legends, or LOL, which is always funny because that also means laugh out loud. But in fact, I actively dislike the game. But the show, it's just based in the League of Legends universe. They have a bunch of lore. There's world, there's a whole continent and cities and people and blah, blah, blah. They've developed a lot of lore. So the show ultimately, in a sense, has nothing to do with the game. Only in that some of the characters in the show are also like playable characters in the game. But this is more of like an origin story show going way back. So if you are a League of Legends fan like Lily, there's probably some cool Easter eggs, and like you might go, oh, that I recognize that about this character. Later they're going to turn into that one or something. I have zero knowledge of the show whatsoever. I mean, of like League of Legends, of lore. I played the game once back in like 2014 or 15 because a League friend of mine, not Lily, had tried Dota. Though Lily did try Dota and played Drow Ranger mid or something.
I sucked.
Yeah, you did, but that's okay. Dota's a hard game. I went into
you don't
League.
Even sugarcoat it. Goddamn.
I mean, I went into League and I sucked. I played Annie. That's the only character. I don't even know her background or anything. Anyway, the point is, I don't like League of Legends, but the Arcane is amazing. It's a phenomenal show. It's getting a lot of hype and reviews. I guess hype's the wrong word.
Rightfully so.
Sam's a recovering League addict, apparently. Yeah, rightfully so. So this is one of the shows I can say that actually lives up to its hype. Coming in, I didn't know anything other than I kept seeing like 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. The show's really cool. I did see a trailer. And by the trailer, you can just kind of tell, okay, there's two factions, two cities. Basically, they don't like each other. There's some fighting. But the trailer doesn't really give anything away. So I basically went into this almost blind in a sense of like, other than a very basic sketch of the story, I didn't know anything about the characters or where it might go. And I guess I would say it's really surprising there's a lot I want to say about it, but I'll try and keep this short because we're wrapping up in like 10 minutes. But basically, I guess I want to talk about the like thematics a bit first and sort of the show rating. The show is rated TV-14, and I feel like that's misleading. This is almost an R-rated show. It's like a really hard PG-13, like really hard. And if there was basically a little more violence on display, the show is very violent, but it's like, there's not like blood and gore flying everywhere. But if there was, it would easily be an M-rated show. Like, but thematically, I feel like this is an M or R-rated show. By thematically, I mean like, I don't know, there's lots of political stuff going on. There's corruption, abuse, exploitation,
straight up torture.
There's torture, there's mass murder, there's terrorism, there's like serious mental health issues. I think the
only reason it was PG-13 is because it was an animation style.
Yeah. But in any case, don't go into this thinking it's like some kiddie show. This is very adult, even though the main characters in many cases are kids, these two sisters, Vi and Powder. But there's also other main characters, but the main characters are these sisters, and they're sort of how they grow up. It's not trailer kind of, yeah.
And they're only kids in the first half, and even then, Vi's a pretty upper end teenager. Like she's, I think, 16 in the first half, and then after the time skip, she's solidly an adult.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Teenagers to adults, and there's other, So the basic premise is there's this undercity called Zon, in the top side called, what is it, Piltover or something?
Piltover. Mm-hmm.
And the top side's all rich and fancy, and it's this city of progress. In the past, there was a big war with something to do with magic. It's kind of alluded. And then this city is sort of forsaken all ideas of magic, and they just want to rely on technology and be like progressive and cool and safe and kind of, be a beacon of future and hope. It's all very noble. So what's interesting to me about the show is I think it's really relatable because of all these human struggles that it portrays on both sides, on the top side and the bottom. What I feel like a fairly good summary is the show is full of bad people who want good things, because even the bad guys basically want good things. Like there's a drug lord or sort of person who runs the Undercity, and he does a lot of bad stuff. He's undoubtedly a villain, but he does want good things. He wants to be respected by topside. He kind of wants freedom and independence from them. He doesn't want to be ruled over by their sort of oppressive, like police enforcer regime sort of thing. The top side isn't like that. It's just the bottom. So he wants good things, but he goes about them in a bad way. And I find that interesting. He's not afraid, use intimidation and murder and corruption and smuggling and, flood the streets with drugs and all this stuff for money. But he's also trying to achieve independence for his people. But he's also kind of a scumbag. So it's like, there's a lot of shades of gray in this show. And I personally think this said villain and some of his underlings are actually some of the most compelling characters in the show. I think they're really, really interesting. But anyway, that's just about it thematically. I personally like this kind of stuff. I like shows that are a little darker, a little heavier. And I guess I was mostly caught by surprise because the show kept going places I didn't expect it to. I was like, what? They did that, or they said that, or this is happening? Like, wow. But there's a lot, there's multiple storylines going on in the top side and the underside, and there's various intersecting arcs. The show takes place over 3 arcs broadly, with 3 episodes each. So it's I think they even call it arc 1, 2, and 3. So there's sort of this lot of build up and tension, and then sort of a climax finale episode, which is episodes 3, 6, and 9. So it's also released in a really interesting way. They could almost be their own movies, and it's roughly 2 hours. It's about a 6-hour show total, give or take. So it's almost kind of like 3 movies in a sense. But they're also very interconnected. They take place. There is a time jump between episode 3 and 4. Pretty big one. Like, it's indeterminate. It doesn't actually say, but it seems to be around 5-ish years, maybe even more.
Around 5.
Years.
If they're going by the lore ages that the characters are in the game,
right,
and you subtract 1 or 2 from that because there's still like some clear development going on,
right,
and it's about 4 or 5 years.
Sure. And then after that, but otherwise it's continuous. All the storylines pick up right where they left off and everything. So I guess who would like this show? I mean, any League of Legends fan, I'm sure, would like the show. But I can recommend it to anyone who, because again, even if you're like, I hate League of Legends, forget about it. Just watch the show. It's really, really good. The storylines are compelling. The animation's phenomenal. It's like next level visual style. Super cool. Like just almost mind blowing. It's so good. The music,
I had a bad thought, and I don't think everyone who plays League of Legends would like it because there are some very racist and homophobic people who play League of Legends, and Arcane has a mixed race relationship. And it's not officially confirmed, but they're pretty much lesbians relationship in there. I
mean, it's hinted at. It's hinted at. Yeah, and it's true. The MOBA space is very toxic across the board. Yeah. Well, I can't account for the bad eggs, but just if you like action, you like adventure, you want a compelling story, go watch Arcane. It's really cool. It's kind of a steampunky aesthetic. Actually really reminds me of Dishonored, if there's any Dishonored fans out there. Though this game came out before that, so I can't say the inspiration. But it's just a really good show. Music's good. Voice acting's really good. There's some big name actors in there doing the voice acting, and also some lesser known, but very consistent voice acting across the board. Music's really cool. I have the soundtrack on Spotify. World building's pretty good. I have easily give the show like a 9 or 9.5 out of 10. I have a few niggles about the show, a few minor complaints, but no major ones. I just think it was just really good. And yeah, I binge watched the first half of it. Lily binge watched the second half of it. It's very compelling.
The second 2/3 of it, more like.
Yeah, right.
I got to the time skip, and then I'm about to leave to head to my in-laws for Thanksgiving, and I was literally sitting there like, can I tell my wife that I'm going to be an hour late? Because I don't... Because she left early to go help cook, and I'm still here doing work, so I'm sitting there looking at the screen like, all right, I can't tell her I'm still at work because she knows I'm off work by now, so how do I play this?
Yeah. What's interesting about the show is, there's tons of action in the show, more than you'd think, and it's done really well. It's one of the best, if not the best, like animated action shows I've ever seen, and I watch a lot of anime. It's just really well done. It's impactful, it's kinetic, it's largely believable. 2 of my criticisms around the show revolve around 2 characters doing stuff in combat they have, in my opinion, they have no right to be able to be doing. One guy can literally dodge bullets. I understand that because I went and looked it up later, but as far as the show is concerned, like showing someone like me who doesn't know, it's like, well, how can they do that? It doesn't make sense. One kid can just like literally Echo.
Oh yeah, because
and he's dodging bullets against Jinx, who's shown to be a crack shot in the show from a kid. She's like an expert Deadeye marksman, but this kid's just like, pew pew, I'm dodging bullets. It's like, how? I understand based on the show he has like some sort of time manipulation skills or something, but in the game, but in the show there's no mention of everything's just technology and like skill level. There is like hints of magic, but it's like in the background there's some scientists, like there's an arc there where these 2 scientists are exploring it and trying to develop it. But this particular character, this kid, he hasn't, other than being like pretty acrobatic, there's no reason he can dodge bullets on the logic of what they show you. That's all I'm saying. I know lore nerds or game nerds will understand, he's got these, but as for what they actually show you, there's no like believability there. And I'm just like, give me a break. How is he dodging bullets against a crack shot? Like, pasha, nonsensical.
That wasn't actually a magic ability. That was a tech ability. That clock that he winded back.
Okay, yeah.
He made that himself from Hex Tech, and I guess they didn't make it super clear in the show, but there's a reason they focus so much on, I'm setting this stopwatch and now I'm going to rush through all these bullets because That's how we.
They showed the watch, and then he went into it. It didn't mean anything to me. I'm just like, WTF's going on.
It wasn't super clear in the show, but that's where that ability comes from. It's a hex tech ability.
Okay. I guess I was slightly biased because I really like Jinx, the character who got beat up in that moment. Minor spoiler. She's basically a cross between like Harley Quinn and Tiny Tina plus her own thing. But she's a really interesting, compelling character. Also very tragic, very traumatic.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this show so harsh in a sense is that I'm just going to finish by saying like it's showing all these kids dealing with and not really with any conclusion, like all this trauma. Yeah.
I saw this meme of it was, the like the super thick book and then like a really tiny book next to it. And then on the left it said, like for the really thick book, it was like Arcane story. And then on the right it was Arcane story if Powder got therapy.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Huh? Poor girl. Yeah. Sam, you had a thought?
Yeah, I just want to say, like, as I played League since 2011, I think, for like thousands of hours, probably tens of thousands, thousands of dollars spent as well, unfortunately. I was like zero expectations. I heard the show was coming out like a year or whenever ago they announced it. I totally forgot about it. And then when I saw it came out, I'm like, oh, this will probably be some like cringe show to get like the next generation of like 10-year-olds into League so they can make more money off them. No, this show's like really, really good. Like, yeah, like definitely like a lot of really heavy topics that are flirting with like the 18 rating, but really, really good. Like as a League fan, I loved it, but you didn't have to know anything about League to enjoy the show, as John mentioned. And like I know League fans are it was a little bit controversial in the last couple of years because they've been retconning like almost all lore in the game. But I really like how they're kind of setting things up now with the show and with the lore and stuff like that. Like not all the lore has been changed, but several champions have literally just had their lore deleted, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, this is his background. It's not the one it's been since 2011. It's
right.
It's soft retcons for the most part. I can't think of any character that's had a major retcon. Like story's unrecognizable, but they've definitely fucked with the story a little bit. But it's a far cry from the last time we've had lore, and I absolutely love that Riot is bringing lore back, because even though it's a MOBA, it's nice to have that story there. It's nice to know what your character is like. Okay, what do these voice lines mean? Why is this character like gruff and nihilistic? Why is this character like happy-go-lucky? Like, it's flavor, yeah, but having that extra detail just makes it a little more enjoyable. And they used to do so much lore back in the day. There was, I don't know if you remember, Sam, the Journal of Justice, like if it was weekly or monthly, I don't remember, but they would have these lore drops, and then the world would be built up, and then they would release a game mode, and there would be an explanation for why that game mode was there.
Cool.
But
yeah, League has such awesome lore, and it makes me really excited for the. They're making a ton of games right now, like outside of League, but that are based in the League universe. So I'm excited, sort of. What's going to be?
And it's really nice.
Several. Sadly, only League of Legends itself is available for Mac. There's like 3 or 4 other games just released or releasing that don't have Mac support. But
Ruined King, it's not available for Mac?
Not that I've saw. But I wanted to ask you guys, as League fans watching Arcane, did you spot like particular Easter eggs or kind of like, stuff you could recognize, or like say in the first 3 episodes or something, you were like, oh, that's really cool, or whatever? Because I didn't have those moments as a non-League fan. It was just like, I appreciated the show in general. But did you get like extra out of it being a League fan?
I'll go first. Yeah, definitely. The whole time I was waiting for Vi to get her gauntlets. And
okay.
There's one fight where like you hear her like ultimate sound, which would mean absolutely nothing if you didn't play League, but she's like fighting somebody and she's like, I don't know, just the sound hint from her ultimate happens, and like it fits perfectly, but you're just like, yes, there it is. There's the I used to be a Vi main for like years, so.
Oh, okay. That must be
it was very satisfying.
Pretty gratifying. Interesting. How about you, Lily?
I was a Caitlyn main for many years.
Oh, snap. Okay.
So yeah, seeing her was awesome. Seeing the crack shot she has going. I'm waiting for her to get her sniper because she's only had the rifle and she had to give it up. But
yeah, she gave it away. Yeah.
I'm waiting for her to bust out the big gun, so I'm looking forward for that.
Interesting.
But there were definitely some aha moments. Like the biggest one for me was when you hear Victor introduces himself. Like Jace was just like, "Oh, what's your name?" And he just says, "My name is Victor." And to people who don't know League, it's like, "Oh, okay, cool, new character, Victor." To those of us who play the game and know what Victor's end state is already, it was just like mind blown. At least for me, it was like mind blown. Like, holy shit, that's Victor. Like, what happens? Where is this going?
Interesting. Yeah, I've seen some really funny memes on the Arcane subreddit, which I just joined the other day. Anyway, it's kind of I guess I don't want to spoil it, but basically it shows Jace going like, "Hey Victor, have you seen Sky?" And he's like, "No," and he's got a vacuum cleaner. He's vacuuming the floor.
Spoilers.
But it doesn't actually. It's only a minor spoiler, and you've kind of seen it. And he's like, "Huh? I don't know what you're talking about." And he's like vacuuming. Kind of a dark comedy moment there, but basically it's just a really good show that lives up to the hype. It's a great action adventure. It's really has a lot of like relatable human moments. There's a lot of just generally well depicted struggle. Again, a few nitpicks. They like vaguely skip over. I feel like there's a little, what do you call it? A couple moments are kind of fast forwarded, or characters arrive like, "I'm here and now I'm here," in terms of like emotionally or mentally, and it's kind of like, ooh, that feels maybe a little too fast. But no major nitpicks about the show. I just think it's really cool, really well done. League fan or not, as Sam and Lily have shown, if you are a League fan, there's a lot of extra cool stuff. I was blown away by the show, knowing nothing about it. Went beyond my expectations, other than I saw the trailer. So, okay, at some point, for example, I know Vi got some gauntlets, but I figured it was just like, I figured she just got her hands on some special tech, like temporarily. Now I understand, it's like I went and looked up her character later. Oh, okay, it's like her thing. She's, this brawler. But yeah, it's just well done, generally well done. Cool show. Again, not a kid's show. I feel like they say TV 14. I feel like it's more like TV 16. That's not a rating. The UK, I think, has a 15 rating or something, but they're the only ones. So would not recommend it for your kids at all, even if your kids play League or something. Not a kid's show at all. So just putting that out there. Or if you are an adult who's dismissing the show as being a kid's show, not at all. Go check it out. It's really cool. If you like that sort of setting, you have to kind of like sci-fi, this kind of tech stuff. And I guess you have to also like animation. Some people don't like animation. But this is a really cool animated style. So
I don't really like anime, and I liked it a lot.
Right? So at least go check out a trailer and you can get an idea of the style. But yeah, the show's really cool, full of cool characters. Epic finales, really very turns. Epic and awesome, and by turns also like heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching. It's just a really cool show. Ends on a bit of an annoying cliffhanger, I must say. I wish they showed like maybe 30 more seconds. It's a little pesky, but season 2's coming. And I presume probably more seasons, because I heard somewhere that all Netflix shows are contracted for like 3 seasons minimum or something like that. I don't know how true that is. But in any case, the show's done well and is super popular, so I'm sure they'll keep making more of it.
I know that Netflix usually does multiple seasons, but they always have an escape clause in there. Like if a show doesn't get a certain amount of popularity or views, then they're like, "See ya."
Yeah, that's why apparently if there's some metric where there's like Netflix is filled with shows that are like 3 seasons long, but no more.
Yeah.
Because they did their run and then boop, they're cut off. But stuff like, say, The Witcher show is mega popular. We only have a season 2 coming, releasing pretty soon, a couple of weeks, I think. Presumably they'll make more as a mega hit. Something like Arcane is turning out to be also a mega hit. I'm sure they'll make more as well than 3, presumably. So, but that's cool. Yeah. We had some thoughts in the future to talk about some TV shows, like maybe Foundation, which is on Apple Plus. We'll see if we get there, because Tad and Sam are fans of that. I don't know if anyone, the rest of us, have seen it. But I thought Arcane was a cool place to start, because it's actually a show based on a game, and that game is also available on Mac, and it's a really good show, so it fit all the criterion to be talked about. But yeah, really fun. Even if you just like, there's so much action in the show, far more than you'd think. So even if you just kind of want to just sit back and chill with some action, you can also just go and watch the show. I guess it's hard to chill with the show when there's all this like drama going on, but there's some really cool fight scenes. Even if you just want to look up like best of Arcane fight scenes, I'm sure there's already compilations or something put out there. Pretty rad. Yeah. And that will do it for this episode 20. I believe a few folks have to get going, and we've covered some very interesting topics across the board. So I think this is also the first time we've had 5 people on, if I'm not mistaken. So that's pretty cool. So thanks to all of you for making this a special episode 20. Casper, Ted, Sam, and Lily, really appreciate it. And we appreciate you, the listeners, who keep supporting us with your listening and downloads. Our stats are holding very steady across the board, in some cases growing. So that's really fun. I think we've hit over 1,000 downloads total now. I actually forget. Or maybe not, because I didn't get a all-time. Oh, no, I'm wrong. We only have 900. But with the YouTube views, I'm pretty sure we have over 1,000. So, but official stats are approaching 1,000 downloads. So that's pretty cool. So thanks to everyone. And we will be back next week with another show. And have good luck, have fun out there.
Cheerio.
See you later, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Yep, see y'all.
A big thank you to Kevin McLeod for the intro and outro music. Be sure to check out his library on the web. You can find more episodes of our show on our website, macgamecast.com, or in all major podcast directories. If you enjoy the show, please consider commenting, following, or sharing. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.